If you asked 100 Americans how rich the average retiree is, you'd get 100 different answers. Some would guess 200,000, others would say a million. A few would just shrug and say not enough. Here's the problem. They're all wrong and they're all right. Because the average retiree is a myth. It's a number on a page that describes almost nobody. What actually exists is a ladder. A very specific ladder with very specific rungs. And the distance between those rungs, how far apart they really are, is something almost no one talks about. Because some of the gaps are shockingly small, and others are an absolute wall. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to walk you up every single rung of that ladder using real Federal Reserve data. By the end, you'll know exactly which rung you're standing on and exactly how far the next one is. And there's one gap in particular that changes everything about how you think about your own retirement. Larry is 64 years old. He lives outside of Columbus, Ohio, in a 3-bedroom house he bought in 2003. He's got a pension from 22 years at a manufacturing company, a 401k he's been adding to since his mid-40s, and Social Security that he hasn't claimed yet. On paper, Larry is fine. He knows that. His financial advisor told him he's on track. His wife tells him they'll be okay. His neighbor just bought a new truck, and Larry quietly wonders whether that guy has more saved or less. But here's what keeps Larry up on a Tuesday night. Not panic, just a question. A question he can't Google his way out of. Where does he actually stand? Not compared to some hypothetical average. Not compared to what Fidelity says he should have. Compared to actual retirees. Real people his age, with real balances, living real lives. If you've ever had that feeling, that nagging sense that everyone else seems to have it figured out except you already know what Larry is dealing with. It's not a financial crisis. It's an information gap. He has a number, he just doesn't know what that number means relative to everyone else. Larry doesn't want reassurance. He wants a map, and that's exactly what we're going to build starting at the bottom. Let's start where nobody wants to start. The bottom rung. According to the Federal Reserve's 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances, the most comprehensive snapshot of American household wealth, the bottom 25% of households aged 65 to 74 have a net worth at or below roughly $112,000. Now, before you react to that number, let me tell you what it actually means. Net worth isn't just savings. It includes everything: the house, the car, the retirement accounts, minus whatever debt is still owed. So, a household at $112,000 might own a modest home with some equity and have almost nothing in liquid savings. Who are these people? They're not who you think. This isn't a story about poor decisions. The data shows 3 dominant patterns at this rung. First, careers without employer-sponsored retirement plans. 30% of private sector workers still have no access to a workplace retirement plan. Second, a major financial disruption, a divorce after 50, a medical emergency, a layoff in your late 50s that never fully recovered. Third, late starters who simply ran out of runway. Here's what makes this rung uncomfortable to talk about. Most of the people standing on it did not make catastrophically bad decisions. They didn't gamble their savings away. They didn't blow it on luxuries. Many of them worked for 30 or 40 years, raised families, paid taxes, and did everything they were told to do, except they did it in an economy that didn't give them the tools to build wealth. A cashier who worked at the same grocery chain for 27 years. A home health aide who took care of other people's parents while her own retirement account stayed at zero. A small business owner who put every dollar back into the business and never had a 401k to begin with. This rung is crowded. 1 in 4 retiree-age households lives here, and most of them never expected to. Now let's climb one rung. The 25th to 50th percentile. This is the group between roughly $112,000 and $410,000 in net worth. And here's the first surprise. The people on this rung and the people one rung below, they look almost identical from the outside. Same neighborhoods, same cars, same grocery stores. If you passed them on the street, you couldn't tell them apart. The difference usually comes down to 1 or 2 structural factors. An employer match they contributed to for 15 years, a house they bought at the right time, a small inheritance, maybe $50,000 or $70,000, that went straight into an index fund instead of a kitchen renovation. That's it. The gap between the bottom rung and this one is not a canyon of discipline or genius. It's a series of small structural advantages that compounded quietly over decades. Think about it this way. Two women, both 67, both worked as administrative assistants in the same city. One of them worked for a company that offered a 401k with a 3% match. The other worked for a company that didn't. Over 25 years, that single difference the match created a gap of over $150,000. Same work, same hours, same pay, completely different outcome. And that's the first thing most people get wrong about this ladder. They assume the rungs are separated by talent, by hustle, by some fundamental difference in character. The data says otherwise. The data says the lower half of the ladder is separated by access and timing more than anything else. Let's keep climbing. Before we go higher, we need to stop and talk about the number everyone misuses. The average. When you hear that the average net worth of Americans aged 65 to 74 is approximately $1.8 million, what's your gut reaction? Probably something like, there's no way, that can't be right. And your instinct is correct. It's technically accurate and completely misleading. Here's why. Imagine 10 retirees in a room. 9 of them have a net worth of about $300,000. One of them has $20 million. The average of that room is $2.27 million. But that number describes exactly 0 of the 10 people in it. That's what the mean does. It gets dragged upward by a small number of very wealthy households. In fact, 10% of American households control roughly 2/3 of all household wealth. So the average is really telling you about them, not about you. The median strips that distortion away. It finds the person in the exact middle, half above, half below, and tells you what typical actually looks like. For households aged 65 to 74, the median net worth is $409,900. Call it $410,000. Now sit with that number for a second. $410,000. That includes the house, that includes the retirement accounts, that includes the car in the driveway, and the savings account at the local bank. For half of all retiree age Americans, everything they own minus everything they owe adds up to less than that. And here's the context that makes it land harder. The median 401k balance for Americans aged 65 and older, according to Vanguard, is just $95,425. That means the typical retiree's investment account alone wouldn't cover 3 years of average spending. The rest of their net worth is locked in their house, which they can't easily spend without selling or borrowing against it. That is the real center of the ladder. Half of all retiree age households in America have less than $410,000. Half have more, and if you're anywhere near that number, you are, by definition, the average retiree. But here's where it gets interesting. The 50th to 75th percentile is where most of this channel's audience lives, and it's the most psychologically confusing rung on the entire ladder. This group has a net worth between roughly $410,000 and $1.1 million. And almost universally, they share one trait. They don't feel wealthy. They'll tell you they're comfortable. They'll say, we're doing okay. But if you ask them whether they're rich, they'd laugh. The data tells a different story. If you are in this range at age 65 to 74, you are ahead of at least half and up to 3/4 of every household your age in the country. You are, by any statistical definition, doing better than most. So why doesn't it feel that way? 2 reasons. First, the people you compare yourself to aren't a random sample of America. They're your neighbors, your coworkers, your brother-in-law. And those people are roughly in your bracket, so everyone around you looks the same, and same doesn't feel like winning. Second, the financial industry has spent decades anchoring you to a number that's higher than what most people actually need. The "you need $1.5 million to retire" headline isn't based on median spending. It's based on models designed to make you feel behind because anxious savers buy more products. Here's a number that might reset your frame. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that the average annual spending for households aged 65 and older is roughly $60,000. That's $5,000 a month. If you're in this bracket with a paid-off house, Social Security covering $2,000 to $3,000 a month, and a portfolio you can draw from at a sustainable rate, you're not just surviving, you're funded. The truth is, if you're in this range and your house is paid off or close to it, your actual monthly need is probably lower than you think, and the distance to the next rung is not as far as it feels. Which brings us to the moment this whole video has been building toward. Let's put the ladder on the table and look at the actual gaps. Here are the approximate net worth thresholds for American households aged 65 to 74, according to Federal Reserve data. Bottom 25%, at or below $112,000. 50th percentile, the median, $410,000. 75th percentile, approximately $1.1 million. 90th percentile, approximately $3.2 million. Now look at the gaps between each rung. From the 25th percentile to the 50th, about $298,000. From the 50th to the 75th, about $690,000. From the 75th to the 90th, roughly $2.1 million. Do you see what happened? The bottom half of the ladder from the 25th percentile to the median is separated by less than $300,000. That's a paid-off house. That's 15 years of maxing out an IRA. That's a modest inheritance and a decent savings rate. But the top quarter of the ladder, from the 75th to the 90th, is separated by over $2 million, and the distance only accelerates from there. This is the shape of the ladder nobody shows you. The bottom rungs are close together, almost within arm's reach. The top rungs are a different world entirely. And here's why this matters for you personally. If you're sitting at $400,000 and wondering whether you'll ever reach $1 million, the math says the behavioral gap is smaller than you think. It's not a different species of person at 1 million. It's the same person with a few more years of compounding and one or two right decisions. But if you're at 1 million looking up at 3 million, that's a fundamentally different equation. That's not just discipline. That's income or inheritance or business equity. And here's maybe the most practical way to think about it. Translate those net worth gaps into monthly retirement income. Using a standard 4% withdrawal rate, the difference between $410,000 and $1.1 million is about $2,300 a month in portfolio income. That's the gap between the median and the 75th percentile, expressed not as a scary lump sum, but as a monthly number, $2,300. Now think about what could close that gap over 10 or 15 years. Maximizing catch-up contribution. Delaying Social Security from 62 to 70, which alone can add $700 to $1,000 a month to your benefit. Paying off a mortgage to eliminate a $1,200 monthly obligation. None of those require a windfall. They require a plan. The ladder isn't just about where you are. It's about understanding that the next rung might be closer than the numbers first suggest. Now let's look at who's actually up there, because they're not who you'd expect. The 75th to 90th percentile is the most fascinating group on this ladder, and they are almost completely invisible. Their net worth ranges from roughly $1.1 million to $3.2 million, and yet, if you met them, you'd probably never guess it. This is the couple with a paid-off house worth $350,000, a combined retirement portfolio around $700,000, Social Security benefits they strategically delayed until 70, and maybe a small rental property or a pension. No Lamborghini, no vacation home in Aspen, no visible signals of wealth at all. They drive a 6-year-old Toyota. They still use coupons. They haven't renovated the kitchen since 2014. Their idea of a splurge is a 2-week road trip to see the grandkids, not a European cruise. And they are richer than 75 to 90% of every household their age in America. If you told them that, most would push back. We're not rich, they'd say. We just don't waste money. And that sentence, that exact sentence, is the defining characteristic of this rung. They don't identify as wealthy. They identify as careful. And that self-image is precisely what got them here. The research is consistent on this point. The households that accumulate the most wealth in retirement are not the highest earners. They're the most consistent savers who avoided catastrophic financial mistakes. No late career divorce that split assets in half. No co-signing a loan for an adult child that went bad. No panic selling during 2008 or 2020. No lifestyle creep that turned a $200,000 income into a $200,000 spending habit. They didn't do anything spectacular. They just didn't do anything destructive. And here's the part that surprises people most. The gap between this group's monthly income and the group just below them is often narrower than expected. A household at the 75th percentile with optimized Social Security, a modest pension, and a 4% withdrawal rate might bring in $5,000 to $6,000 a month. A household at the 60th percentile with slightly less in savings but the same Social Security timing may be $4,200. The monthly difference, $800 to $1,000, is real, but it's not a different life. It's the same life with a little more margin. Now the final rung, the top 10%. To enter this group at age 65 to 74, you need a net worth of approximately $3.2 million or more. And the 99th percentile, the top 1%, starts at roughly $16 million. Let me be clear about who these people are. This is not hedge fund money. This is not tech founder money. The vast majority of households in the top 10% got there through three converging factors, not one. Factor one, time in the market, not timing the market, 25 to 35 years of consistent contributions to equity-heavy retirement accounts. The S&P 500 returned an average of roughly 10% annually over the last 30 years. A person who invested $500 a month starting at age 35 and never stopped would have crossed $2 million by 65 on market returns alone. Factor 2, real estate appreciation. A house bought in 1995 for $180,000 in the right zip code could be worth $600,000 or more today. That's not investing genius, it's geography and time. And for many of these households, home equity represents a third or more of their total net worth. They didn't plan it as an investment strategy, they just stayed put. Factor 3, the absence of wealth-destroying events. No bankruptcy, no prolonged unemployment, no catastrophic medical debt before Medicare eligibility, no costly divorce in their 50s. In other words, runway without potholes. Here's what's striking when you look at the data closely. The difference between the 75th percentile and the 90th percentile is not one factor, it's all three firing at once. Plenty of people had long careers in the market. Plenty owned homes that appreciated. But the ones who ended up in the top 10% had all three simultaneously for decades. That convergence is rarer than it sounds. The top of the ladder isn't defined by what these people did differently. It's defined by how long they did it and what didn't happen to them along the way. And that's a truth the financial industry doesn't want to sell you, because be consistent and don't get unlucky doesn't make for a very good seminar. There's no product for that. There's no course for that. There's just time, consistency, and the absence of catastrophe. So if you look at the top rung and feel discouraged, don't. The people up there didn't climb faster. They just climbed longer on a path with fewer obstacles. And many of them will tell you, if they're being honest, that luck played a bigger role than they'd care to admit. So where does Larry end up? Let's do the math. His house is worth about $260,000 and he owes $42,000 on the mortgage. His 401k sits at $310,000. His pension will pay him roughly $1,400 a month starting at 65. He hasn't claimed Social Security yet, and if he waits until 70, his benefit will be around $2,400 a month. He's got about $28,000 in a savings account and another $15,000 in a small brokerage account he opened 5 years ago. Total net worth, roughly $571,000. Larry is in the 50th to 75th percentile. He is above the median. He is ahead of more than half of every household his age in America. And he had no idea. He'd spent years carrying a quiet anxiety that he was falling behind, that the neighbor with the new truck, the coworker who retired at 62, the guy at church who talks about his advisor managing everything, all of them were somehow in a different category. A category Larry assumed he didn't belong to. But here's what the data showed him. Most of those people are on the same rung. Some are one rung below, a few are one above. The spread is narrower than the anxiety. Not because the information wasn't out there, but because nobody ever showed him the ladder. Nobody ever said, here's where you stand, here's what's above you, here's what's below, and here's how close the next rung actually is. For Larry, the distance to the 75th percentile is roughly $500,000. That sounds like a lot. But with his pension, optimized Social Security, and 10 more years of compounding on his 401k, if he delays withdrawals, he might actually get there. Not through some dramatic move, through the same quiet consistency that got him here. And even if he doesn't reach it, even if he stays exactly where he is right now, he's still above the median. He's still ahead of most Americans his age. He's still, by any reasonable definition, doing fine. The map didn't change his balance, it changed how he sees it. Here's what I want you to take from this. The ladder is real, the rungs are real, and now you know where they are But the most important thing isn't which rung you're on. It's that the bottom half of the ladder is closer together than anyone tells you, and the top half is further apart than anyone admits. If you're in the bottom half, the next rung isn't a miracle away. It's a few right decisions compounding over time. An optimized Social Security claiming strategy, a debt payoff that frees up $400 a month, a catch-up contribution to your retirement account for the next 5 years. None of those are dramatic. All of them move you up. If you're in the top half, you're doing better than you feel. The gap between where you are and where you think you should be was probably manufactured by someone trying to sell you something. The median retiree in America has $410,000. If you're above that, you're ahead of most. Full stop. The question was never, am I rich enough? The real question, the one Larry finally got an answer to, is where do I stand and what's the one move that gets me to the next rung? Now you have the ladder. Now you have the map. What you do with it is up to you.